What's up, everybody? Matt Vogt here. Welcome back to another episode of the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. Here at TLP with my partners Derek and Steve, we help dentists just like you all elevate your lives and careers through practice ownership. Head to our website, thelifestylepractice.com, see what we're all about. And while you're there, fill out our free practice assessment survey. It'll ask you some questions if you're a current owner about your current practice, or if you're not an owner yet, you can fill out some of the information there about the type of practice that you're looking for and your goals for your career. And one of us is going to get back to you with some complimentary feedback to start a conversation and hopefully help you in your journey to becoming an owner or being a better owner if you're already in a practice of your own. There's no commitment. If we're a good fit and we can help you, great. And we'd love to do that. That's what we're all about. But we want to reach as many of you as possible. So head over to our website and feel free to fill that out or get in touch with us. And we'd love to start a conversation with you. So today, what we're going to talk about is something that I think is overlooked in a lot of our practices. It's very easy to overlook, and that's retaining patients, making sure that the back door of your practice is closed and that you're keeping your patients in your practice as much as possible. Now, I know that sounds super obvious. Obviously, we want to keep as many of our patients as possible. We don't want them coming through the front door and leaving through the back door. We don't want them coming in for one appointment and then magically never coming back. But this is a huge low hanging fruit for a lot of practices that I see. Heck, my practice, I've had to refocus on this from time to time over the years. We spend so much time thinking about the front door of our practice. How do we get new patients in? Where are we ranking on Google? What's our advertising look like? How are we getting new patients and how many are we getting per month? But we need to all be focusing just as much or more on patient retention and doing everything we can to not let patients slip away. Not only does that affect patient care, but it affects our business. So we're trying to accomplish two very good things here. Something that's very good for the patient by keeping their continuity of care with us as dentists, and also take care of ourselves and our businesses. It's good for us to have more patients in our practice most of the time. I have met someone who wants less patients lately. Well, maybe I have, but that's a topic for another podcast. So today I want to expand on this and talk about why closing that back door of your practice is just as important, if not more important, than getting new patients into your practice consistently. So I'll give you a real world example that inspired this podcast. And this is an example from my own practice. You've heard me talk about my practice on the podcast a lot, and I don't pretend to have a perfect practice at all times. If I or you or anybody thought they had a perfect practice that couldn't be improved on, I'd show you someone who's crazy. There can always be improvements that are made. So in this case, this patient in my practice, we placed an implant for this patient in 2024. And the plan was to place the implant, allow the implant to heal and osseointegrate while we were aligning the teeth with clear aligners and making that mandibular first molar space ideal with clear aligners while the implant was osseointegrating. Then once the alignment of the teeth was done and we were happy with the occlusion and the widened space, basically this patient had lost tooth number 30 a while back. So 31 had started to tip and really shrink that space. Once we got that space to be ideal, we'd restore the implant and mission accomplished. Well, we had placed the implant. We were about ready to start clear aligner therapy, and the patient's girlfriend called to cancel an appointment. She's on his HIPAA form, so no big deal there, but I kind of odd for an adult to not handle their own appointments, but hey, I'm not one to judge. So the patient canceled his upcoming hygiene appointment where we were to then start his clear aligner therapy. So that happened a few months ago. And then earlier this month, a note popped up on the schedule, and it was a request for my assistants to forward the implant information to another dentist across town. Now, I don't blame my team for doing this. I take ownership of not having a system for this that was clear in my practice. But when I saw this on the schedule, this note to simply forward this implant information, some alarm bells were going off in my head. We hadn't uncovered this implant yet. We also hadn't done the clear aligner therapy that Just a few months prior, the patient was telling me how excited they were and how important it was to them to have ideal spacing and ideal occlusion before we restored the implant. So something was off here. Also, in combination here, knowing that once I dove into things, knowing that the patient actually hadn't called our office at all since their last checkup and cleaning. It was just through the girlfriend and then through this other office. So when I saw this note on the schedule, if we just emailed that implant information over without doing anything else, without touching base with the office, without trying to get in touch with the patient, the new office may not fully understand the treatment plan. Obviously, they can figure it out. This isn't that complicated, but we all know that going from dentist to dentist without clear communication can affect patient care. The patient might not fully understand what's going on. If you place implants, you know the importance of uncovering the implant the way you want, building and gaining keratinized tissue the way that you uncover that implant, which is going to affect the health and the overall success of that implant. And if you're the surgeon, you want to do this your way to make sure that tissue is supporting the success of the implant and the final restoration. So certainly I don't want to, unless it's an emergency circumstance or the patient moves across the country before I uncover the implant, it would definitely be in the patient's best interest for me, the surgeon, to uncover and do things the right way. There's an order of operations here that needs to be followed, in my opinion. Now, when I see a records request like this, I also want to know what's going on. Even if that patient thinks that I did a terrible job and that we'll never get along and that they could never bear to see me or talk to me ever again, I would hate that. I would hope that doesn't happen. And if it did, I would certainly learn from it and try to improve on that in the future. But patients leaving the practice oftentimes can leave us breadcrumbs for things that we can improve. And honestly, those can be some uncomfortable things a lot of the time. And a lot of us dentists shy away from those things, or we blame others instead of really looking at ourselves and our practices. But I saw this and I said, maybe there's something here that we need to learn to figure out what we can do better as a practice. So instead of just sending over those records to the office, certainly I'm not going to just withhold them forever for the sake of trying to keep this patient in my practice, but we called the patient. And long story short, the patient's girlfriend had recently gotten a job as an office manager or a front desk team member at this office. And so they wanted the patient to go to this new office to get a discount, or I don't even know the arrangement. They just wanted to go to this office. Nothing that we did wrong or nothing that they felt like we could do better as a practice. This is just what they wanted to do. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to start to get the dollars and cents of things. Clearly, they had their reasons. But what I did say when I called this patient, not a team member, I called him personally. I said, when we are working with this type of implant, it sounded like the office that he went to doesn't use the same implant system. So that we're going to have to order parts and call the rep and just it's clunky. We all know that if we could avoid working with a bunch of different implant systems, we would probably do that. So it was going to be clunky at this office. And I was just honest with the patient. Said, we work with these types of implants all the time. I know how I want to uncover this implant. I don't know if the dentist that you'd be going to does this a lot. I'm sure they're great at it, but I really do feel like we should finish out the implant at our office. That way, should anything ever go wrong, I'm not going to warranty it forever, but should something go wrong as a result of something that we do, maybe we go to uncover the implant and it isn't osseointegrated, or maybe we place a restoration that fails to no fault of our own or fractures. I want to be able to know that it was done the exact right way with my two hands so that I can cover you on this. When it comes to warranties for treatment or, covering things that go wrong, I hate to use the word warranty, but really I feel like just being an understanding person is a great way to treat complications in practice. If this patient didn't come to me for the uncovery, they didn't come to me for the restoration, but then the implant ended up failing years down the road, well, no, there's nothing I can really do to help that patient. I don't know the care that they've been getting. I don't know how they've been cleaning and checking the implant at their recalls. I can't help. But if I know that we restored the implant, we uncovered and everything looked good at that time, I might be able to help the patient out a little bit more. So that's pretty much what I told him. He also told me that he just had a change of mind and didn't want to do clear liners or align his teeth before restoring the implant. Again, Fine. That's totally up to him. So after this conversation, I feel like we were able to give a lot of value to the patient, and we were able to. This patient's coming back to our practice to uncover and restore the implant. So it's a win-win, and I want you to try to look for these situations in your practice at all times where the patient wins, they get better continuity of care, they understand their health and their treatment plan more, and your practice wins because this is revenue and it's easy in this case. You've already placed the implant, you've already done the hard work, now you just have to restore it. So a win-win for everybody. But this is a perfect example of a situation that is going to happen in one of your offices today if you're listening to this. It will happen where patient request records or the office that they're going to request records, they're mid treatment in your office, or they're at some varying level of treatment completed in your office. And the easy way out is to just send those records over and say, okay, well, the patient was grumpy, so I don't want to treat them, or they're not a good fit here, anyways. Honestly, to tell yourself excuses maybe why they might be leaving. That's the easy way out. The harder way, but the right way, in my opinion, if you want to improve and grow as a business, is to reach out to the patient directly. Figure out what's going on. Talk to them about their concerns, talk to them about why they might be going to another office or thinking about going to another office, and get to the bottom of that. Maybe they're just going there for a second opinion. I love when patients get second opinions because I'm not trying to sit there and convince them to get dental treatment done. If they at all balk at the things I have to say, I tell them to get as many opinions as they want. And if they think we're the right fit, I'd be happy to take care of them. So maybe that's the situation. Maybe there's something going on in your practice that caused them to leave that you would have no idea was occurring unless you talk to that patient. Or maybe there's just plain confusion over the treatment plan that you recommended for this patient. It could be confusion that's on the patient's part. It could be confusion that you caused and you can learn from, and simplifying their treatment plan or giving less options or whatever it is that might have spooked the patient to go talk to another practice. And this doesn't have to come from you as the dentist. It could come from a trusted assistant or a trusted team member. I'm all for delegating as much as you can in your practice, but I don't want you to be afraid to pick up the phone and do this yourself and take complete ownership of treatment acceptance in your practice. Take complete ownership of closing the back door in your practice, and don't bury your head in the sand when it comes to patients leaving. We don't want to get to a point where we, like a lot of practices do, they see a slowdown in the schedule for whatever reason. It might just be that time of the year where you tend to see a little bit of a slowdown in your practice, and you go into your unscheduled treatment list and you see all these patients who never scheduled treatment that you and I both know they urgently needed and canceled their latest recall, and you have no idea why. At the very least, knowing why is going to help you. I guarantee you, if you polled the last 50 patients who left your practice and asked them why and actually got that answer, some practically speaking, you probably can't get that information or people aren't going to answer the phone a lot of the time. But if you knew why the last 50 people left your practice, you would see a trend in there and something that you could address or improve on immediately to be a better dentist, a better practice owner, and have a better business overall. I think it's a wonderful thing that you could implement today in your practice, a system of reaching out to the patient themselves immediately whenever you receive a records request from another office, especially if that patient is mid treatment plan in any way with you. I think this is, again, an opportunity for a win win scenario. Now, certainly, I am not telling you to make it more difficult to send records for a patient. I'm not telling you to withhold records. Certainly, that'd be silly and illegal. I still encourage you to communicate professionally with another office when something like this happens, but your entire team needs to be trained on how to do this. Your entire team needs to be able to recognize when a patient such as this one I just mentioned could really benefit from a follow up from your team. They need to recognize when this occurs, how to communicate with the other office. If someone calls from that other office requesting that implant information, They need to be able to say, you know what? Something's weird here because this patient was scheduled to come back in for the next step of their implant and that suddenly got canceled. Can you give me a little more information on that? Or I'd like to speak with the doctor and see if we need to reach out to the patient to make sure that something doesn't slip through the cracks here. Do not accept your team taking the easy way out in these scenarios and just sending those records along without making any ounce of effort to try to understand what's going on and why this person is just walking out the back door of your practice. The cool thing about things like this in your practice is that you can change them today. You can wake up, you can listen to this podcast on the way to your office. You can go in and you can say, team, here's something I thought about, and here's what we're going to do for these situations going forward. You've heard me talk about this on the podcast about how taking action and doing so quickly is the path to success, not ruminating over every little thing or thinking for weeks about implementing something like this. Just do it. Just do it and acknowledge that you're not always going to be perfect with the decisions you make, but that you're going to modify things on the fly if need be. I know in situations like this, a lot of you like to get records releases signed by patients or authorized by patients before you forward records to another office. I'm not here to debate how to do that. But what if you added just another little moment if you're trying to communicate with the patient to get these releases? Why don't you give a moment to figure out why they're leaving? Or if they're mid treatment, figuring out a way to make that transition successful or helping the patient understand what's going on if they're confused. A lot of this sometimes just means going the extra mile. And I go back to urging you to never let your team or your practice just go through the motions. I know that a lot of the time, these types of scenarios are not seen with the same level of seriousness by your team as they are by you, because they don't understand the effort and, quite frankly, the money that it takes to bring in a new patient. They don't understand the true value of a patient that is new to your practice, comes in and stays with your practice for years and gets the necessary treatment and the treatment that you recommend done in your practice. They don't quite understand the value of that. We are better able to understand the value of that because it directly translates to our income and our living that we make from our practices. How can you kind of combat that with your team? It's speaking passionately on these topics. It's leading with passion and by example. It's conveying that when a patient leaves your practice or suggests leaving your practice, that is a really big deal. And we take that very seriously. Now, we know that patients leave our practices for practical reasons all the time. And we know that there are patients who aren't a great fit. I'm not telling you to never lose a single patient in your practice, but treat this with seriousness, analyze and dissect when things like this happen with your team, and don't just shrug your shoulders and let it go on. And I guarantee you, your team will treat it with the same level of respect and the same level of desire to close the back door of your practice and retain patients as much as possible. This can translate to better follow-up with patients, better treatment acceptance. There's a snowball effect here, and it starts with you reinforcing to your team the importance of closing the back door. The front door matters, but the back door matters just as much. If you want a healthier, more profitable practice, you can't just leave it wide open. You've got to have systems in place. You've got to have protocols to retain patients in your practice as much as possible. All right, everybody, go be great dentists today and reach out to me, Matt, at thelifestylepractice.com with an email if I can help you, if you have questions about anything, or if you'd like to talk more about working one-on-one together. I'd love to help you grow in your life and career. Until next time, cheers. I'll talk to you again soon. Sicker than your average.